everyone. Hello, Dangerlings. Sorry, I'm not live on Dangerous Wednesdays this week, but we have very exciting. Once again, we are joined here on Dangerous Wednesdays by Luis Loza and Eleanor Ferron of Paizo of the Lost Omens line. Luis, Eleanor, how are you doing?
We're doing all right. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. I've done that thing where I've asked both of you at the same time. I should have better Zoom etiquette by now. Thank you so much for agreeing to pre-record this interview. We would have done it live, except due to a scheduling change, I'm taking my stage combat exam right now while this is airing. So I am literally fighting with a long sword right now.
That's pretty rad.
Good luck to you right now.
Thank you. So hopefully it'll go well. I'm so tired. Right, this is an exciting time. We had to get you on, even though it is a busy time, because Lost Omens Mwangi Expanse came out last week, and it is an incredibly exciting book. This of everyone, I'm sure our friend Aaron at Paizo is probably tired of me for the last few weeks, for the last couple of months, really. I've just been like, so when can we talk about the Mwangi Expanse? Because I really want to talk about it. It is a huge book. Do you want to give us, Luis? Do you want to give us a bit of an idea for anyone who's not familiar with this book? What is Lost Omens Mwangi Expanse?
Lost Omens Mwangi Expanse is a setting book that focuses on a particular region of the Inner Sea. The Inner Sea being kind of our main portion of the Lost Omens setting for Pathfinder. Mwangi Expanse is just an enormous, vibrant kind of not necessarily untouched, but it's a place that isn't just taken over by cities and settlements and stuff. It's got massive jungles, massive mountains and forests and plains and stuff. It's just a lot of wilderness, but there are still people living among there. And Mwangi Expanse book itself is taking a look at this region, the cultures, the different people, the ancestries that are unique to the area, all the dangers that come with this as well, including all the different monsters that live in the region. And we just happened to decide we want to give you as much detail as we can. So rather than go with a typical 128-page Lost Omens book, we went with 314, I think it is this time around, to try to give you as much detail as we can. And I honestly feel like we could have doubled it and still felt like we were lacking in space.
Certainly people have been telling us how much stuff they wanted us to put in, but the book's already 314 pages, so...
I only have the PDF, and my tablet feels heavier just for having it. It's a huge book. It's one of those ones that I get the PDF, and there's a few that I'm immediately ordering the print copy of this, because it's a beautiful book. It's the first, so it's kind of the first setting book for second edition. I know we've had the World Guide, which is kind of general, but in terms of focusing on a specific region, this is the first one that we've done. So I guess my first question is, why the Mwangi Expanse for the first setting book? Why Mwangi, and why now, Eleanor?
Well, so we've been tromping around in the Inner Sea region for about the last 10 years. And there's a lot of information on it. There's a lot of adventures on it. I think a lot of people are very familiar with it. I think it's based on tropes that people are pretty familiar with, the very European sort of fantasy, even when we put our own twists on it, which we always try to do. But in this case, a lot of people, I think, were interested to move on to parts of the world that didn't feel as familiar to them. And the Mwangi Expanse was sort of a natural place to go. In part, we put the Magambia, which is the magical school that's centered down there, as a prominent organization that PCs might want to join for obvious reasons. I mean, it's a natural adventure organization. You could go there to research spells. You can go there to learn all sorts of cool magical secrets. You could go there to go on adventures and explore areas and hunt down monsters to protect areas and stuff like that. And And just we never really gave this area a fair shake in Pathfinder First Edition. It had a 64-page source book that really didn't focus enough on anything to be that helpful to people who wanted to really flesh out that area. It's hard to make a character or really dive into the people there, and that setting book was also written from the point of view of outsiders coming into the Mwangi Expanse. Just sort of we're going to come in and explore these forgotten jungles with no signs of civilization, and then in the very same book, yes, oh, here's a civilization, but they don't tell you very much about it. It's like, no, wait, back up, I want to know more. So I think this is something that was a lot of people were interested for a very long time, and we finally got the chance to do it, to really dig in deep in this very large book. We had the opportunity to just dive into it. So that's why the Mwangi Expanse has come out now.
Did you
also? There's the fact that Eleanor and I both really wanted to do this book. So as the kind of people steering the ship on the Lost Zones, like, just let us do it, and yeah, then they did
let us do it, and it'll be great, and it's great.
Was the plan for it to be as huge as it is? Was that a standard sort of decision that the setting books are going to be this long, or did it just grow as a project because of the sort of the love of the people in it?
I think specifically Mwangi Expanse is one that we wanted to give as much space, as much detail as possible, the deepest dive we could. The area is so big, it's got the potential to pull from so much out of the real world in terms of culture and folklore and stuff that, if you needed another European medieval fantasy setting, you have plenty to pick from, and you can kind of pick and choose whatever you need. But if you're looking for something that's drawing on African culture or things that are not necessarily the typical fantasy stuff that you're used to, you don't have much to work with. So we wanted to give as much of that as possible. I think in the future, every region, every setting book like this may vary in size. We don't want to promise 314 pages every single time, possibly because next time you're going to see Absalom, that's going to be about 400 pages. So it's like, well, look, we already broke our promise. But in the future, we might go to areas that we have already explored before in first edition and don't necessarily need as deep of a dive because some of that information is already out there. A lot of APs and other content has already focused on those regions, and it may just not need 300 pages. It might be 200, it might be a typical 128. I think it'll vary from product to product and region to region.
I'm interested because it's kind of, they say Garand is generally fairly, I wouldn't say nothing is underdeveloped in Galarian, but it's less, it was until this point perhaps less developed than the sort of the Navistan, and you get a lot more real world connections in Garand up until now. You've sort of been like, okay, up in the north you have like the place with the vamp, it's Transylvania land, and it's robots and barbarians, and then sort of to the south you have it's kind of Egypt, and then it's kind of Africa, and it's nice to see it kind of more fantasy elements, more sort of Galarian coming into it. But what do you see as Louise, what do you think the expectations are of people when you decide you're going to do a Mwangi Expanse book? I guess you've got to think about what are people going to want from it.
Oh boy, I think a lot of it is just really the look of the area. I mean, people want to see black elves, black adventurers, black dwarves. They want it to look like they would expect if suddenly fantasy came to life in Africa or other regions like that. People want to see themselves. There's a lot of black authors that worked on this that wrote themselves or people they knew into this or characters they've played into this, and just being able to show them that yes, this is still fantasy. It just has a different look. There's different clothing, there's different hairstyles, there's a lot of different stuff that comes with it, but it's obviously fantasy. You can tell who's an adventurer, who's a local commoner, who's a city guard, but they just have a different look to them. I think that's the biggest thing that a lot of people are looking for. Is just, it's my version of fantasy. It looks like me. And then from then on, it's just, we try to grab as much common folklore and myth that as many people would know, so as to start with those easy touchstones to work with, and then kind of see where things go from there. I don't think we had too many expectations going in, at least not from like the higher ups that said, okay, when you do this Mwangi book, it needs to have X, Y, and Z. I think it's just kind of, be considerate, be respectful, but kind of let the Mwangi kind of reveal itself to us and to the authors through and everything. And there is no official like, well, the Mwangi has to have this and this and that, because it's it's an imaginary place, so we can kind of put whatever we want into it, and kind of work with whatever feels like a good fit for it. And just bringing on the variety of authors that we had, they brought what they felt was the perfect fit for the Mwangi, and I think whatever they think is good and whatever everyone else agrees with us while we're working with this is good, that's the Mwangi, that's the true Mwangi Expanse, and that's why we put it in the book.
It should be said, there are some great creators working on this. Lost Omens as a line just always seems to be bringing in new interesting voices into it. Who are some of the interesting the creators that we're going to get to experience that have sort of contributed to this, Eleanor?
Oh, well, you're in luck, because there is a blog on the Paizo website that introduces a lot of the authors, as well as blurbs on where you can find more work of theirs if you're interested.
Oh, fantastic.
I'd personally recommend looking at Jabari Weathers, who is both an artist and a writer of a lot of talent, which is just not fair. But a snippet from his introduction has been going around Twitter and other places on the web. He's the one who wrote the exciting, not exotic sidebar, and some of the others where it talks about, how do you want to be respectful if you're bringing an outside group into the Mwangi Expanse? I know some people have had questions about that. Well, I'm not Black. We're a white group. We don't want to be disrespectful to this setting. What advice do you have? And there's things in the book that actually address that. I also would want to call out Ali Bustian, who did a lot of work on the elves and the Sango halflings and Vidrian, and she also wrote one of the APs for the upcoming Strength of Thousands adventure path, which is going to be fun. And honestly, I'd suggest looking at the blog, because there's so many authors that I'm not calling out here and feeling very bad about. But
we will definitely.
Yeah, I'd need to call up a list and just rattle off names. And
we love Ali. We had Ali on the show just right after PaizoCon, or just around PaizoCon, but before the book had come out, and she did a very good job of talking about stuff that she wrote a long time ago for it, and it wasn't out yet and wasn't allowed to talk about some bits, but just a joy to talk to. And that sidebar, the exciting not exotic bit that Jabari wrote, is a stroke of genius. I think that whole section is very interesting, because I think anyone who might think that this book isn't for them, like say, because I'm not interested in playing a Mwangi character, or I want to play our existing characters and bring them into this space. There is stuff in there about how you play an outsider in a respectful way, and it is certainly something that we've been doing a lot on the podcast, because we've taken we're playing the Slithering at the moment, so we've taken our party from Avestan into Mwangi, and seeing that front and center is incredibly helpful to help with that. In terms of taking it into second edition and working that, obviously you've got some lore already left over from Pathfinder first edition, but it's a mix of stuff, and some of it is written a long time ago. And I know when we kind of made our version of Mwangi to bring in, there was some stuff that we decided, okay, we're not going to use that because the new Mwangi book's not out, but there's some bits we're not sure of. Like when you sat down to look at the first edition lore, what were your goals in terms of, were there sort of bits of it that you definitely wanted to get rid of? Were there bits of it that you sort of felt you wanted to explore more, or is it just kind of just throw the stuff at it and see? What do you think,
You're
Eleanor?
gonna get us in trouble.
I think the approach we took was like handing the book over to our authors and say, none of this is set in stone anymore. If you need to change anything to kind of fit the idea that you have for a given city or a given region or anything, feel free to tweak that. There are a lot of cities that were considered abandoned or in ruins anymore back in the first edition setting book that are now lively places full of people. You know, if you go back and compare them to, you know, say, oh, well, Nantambu was abandoned, or if I remember right, that's one of the abandoned cities. No, of course not. It's full of people. It's vibrant. It's the heart of the Magambia. So like it's got plenty of people. So I think we're not constrained to any existing canon. We wanted to keep locations around where the same locations they were in first edition. You know, we didn't want to move things on the map just for the sake of moving them or anything like that. We wanted to work with as much as what was already there, but tweak that to kind of fit the sensibilities and also the ideas that kind of were coming forth from the authors at that point. So there might be stuff that has changed. You know, obviously there are names that aren't even brought up anymore, things like that, and that, you know, we might explore them again in the future. But for the moment, this is now what we consider the full canon, regardless of what was going on in first edition. We just kind of updated what was needed and then expanded from there.
Let's I tell you what, let's dig into the book itself. Let's talk about, my goodness, we could talk for hours about every bit of the book, but let's look at and it's a Lost Omens chat. So let's talk about ancestries, because this is the year of this has been the year of ancestries for Lost Omens. One of the things I really like in it is that, as well as kind of the new playable ancestries, which we'll definitely get to, there are a lot of regional versions of existing ancestries, of core ancestries. We get new elves, we've got new halflings, we've got new dwarves, very different orcs. What are some of your favorites in terms of the new versions of those, Eleanor?
I mean, I'm partial to the Ekuj, but that's because I wrote about them in an AP volume that I wrote. So that's just my author bias showing through. Although Ali Bastian handled about half of that section in this book. Definitely, yeah. I do like the new dwarves. I've never been a huge fan of dwarves, just as they're presented in typical RPG settings. But I do like the Mbeke and the Talaru. You know, people are really into the rainbow beards on the Talaru, which I definitely think it's a unique brand of dwarf that showed up there. I like the Mbeki and their Cloud Dragon allies, and how they sort of organized around this, and how they let people in that even aren't dwarves, but they're still Mbeke. So you have these Mbeke kobolds with dwarf clan daggers and things like that. I like the new take on them.
I like that you could pick one of these, and it's almost like having a completely original ancestry in terms of the lore to it. There's a lot there to it. Luis, do you have any particular favorites from the regional ones?
I very much enjoy the Matangi orcs.
Yes,
they just are super duper cool. I mean, they still have that traditional feel of orc, where they're, you know, big strong warriors, but it's kind of directed in a different direction rather than being a warring people. They are defenders of the Mwangi Expanse. They're respected among everyone else among the Mwangi. And I also like some of their their funny social customs. The way they court each other, I think, is kind of funny. Just with ostentatious displays of strength and stuff, to be like, look, I'm strong, you're strong, let's come on. Stuff like that is pretty great. And the look of the Matangi orcs is really great too. I love the tattoo motif that they have. It just makes them very distinct. And I think they look awesome.
They definitely have I like that they're leaner. They're not as chunky as you sort of your traditional orcs. But they've got there's a real energy to them. I can't wait to get some of these, and I like the idea they roll around the Mwangi Expanse being heroes wherever they go. There are so many orc players that will be happy with it. So along with all of these, and we should say there's 3 different types of elves. There's so many different ones. On top of these, we also get 6 new ancestries themselves. They are definitely split slightly between kind of the, oh, okay, I kind of expected these would pop up in a book at some point, ancestries. We have the Gripply, we have the Knoll, and then we have the completely out there. How do you come up with something like the Konrasu or the Strix? They're like, I sort of assume that they've not been sitting on a to-do list at Paizo for the last couple of years of like, oh yeah, we should just get them into the game and at some point. Eleanor, where on earth do you even begin with something like that?
Well, they were kind of sitting on a to-do list in that they were mentioned in the World Guide, and ever since that, we kept getting questions on the forums like, "What's a Shisk?" And we were like, well, we're gonna have to answer that when we do the Mwangi Expanse. But up until that point, we didn't know what they were either. We handed those over to the authors. And you can once again blame Ali Bustian for the Konrasu, because that's what we got back from her. These little shards of possibly exploded Aeon that form little tree skeletons around themselves so they can interact with the world. And we were like, okay, that sounds incredible. To go do that. The Inadi have been kind of towing their way into Galarian since the end of first edition. So we wanted to do that. It's sort of a rift between people who love them and people who are arachnophobes. We're sorry about that, but we did want, there's a ton of evil spider monsters in Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder, and we did want to have, just sort of a counterpart to that. They're just little shy spiders that understand that maybe you're terrified of them, and they wanted to accommodate that. And so they learned to look human. And of course, now people think that they're just horrible they're humans that turn into horrible spider monsters at night, but you can't win them all. That's one of the places where we turned it over entirely to the authors and just took what we got back, and the end result seems to be quite out there. I think a lot of people are delighted by just how out there they are. In fact, people have been demanding, why didn't you have more in the book? And the answer is because the book is 314 pages. But
I feel like with all of the art, with the Konrasu, with all of the arms that the sort of they harden over time, isn't it? That they're
all of those arms are basically frozen. You know how trees, when they have young branches, they're very flexible and supple, and then over time, when they grow more, they harden into hardwood, and you can't bend them anymore without them snapping. And that's true of the Konrasu too. They have to keep growing more arms because those ones on their back are hardened.
There are so many possibilities for playing a Konrasu monk, where you just don't know which hand's going to punch you. Oh my goodness! We've got to talk about the Goloma before we move on, because the Goloma is just. It took me so long to get my head around it, but it's just wonderful. Luis, what is a Goloma?
Oh boy, Golomas are Even when we have Konratsu here, I think Golomas are probably the weirdest of the 6 ancestries that are showing up in this book, just because they are completely opposite of what you expect them to be. When you first look at them, they are very monstrous alien looking things. Looks like they have, a bunch of eyes. It almost looks like they're wearing a mask, and they have long strands of hair, which when you realize it, each of those ends with a little tiny eye. So they have hundreds, if not thousands, of eyes on their head all over. They're big and buff, and they're covered in spikes and scary. They look like they look like they're perfect for Starfinder. They're just a whole rule book early. They're in Pathfinder instead. But when you learn about them, it's that they look scary because they want to scare people off because they are afraid. Way long ago, Earthfall happened, and you know what? That was a bad time, and Goloma were looking to keep themselves safe, so they managed to end up developing into what they are now, which is they have lots of eyes, so they always can keep a lookout for anything, and they have a monstrous appearance, so they scare anything else away that comes close. But they're shy little babies is really what they are. All they want to do is just kind of be safe and left alone, and they have a million eyes, so they can kind of keep an eye out for any danger that comes by and get away. They're very good at recognizing masses of danger to the point where like they're used to kind of encountering large groups of people coming to attack them to take their stuff, whatever, and they kind of are ready for pack attacks more than they are for like the lone attacker that's coming by. So honestly, the easiest way to approach a Goloma might be to just do so on your own, and immediately like express that you're not an enemy, and maybe if you're lucky, they'll be confused enough for just a moment for you to get close and like properly explain yourself, because dealing with a single thing, their brains are kind of more ready to process a lot of information at once, and it's hard to focus on the single target. But otherwise, when you're looking at them as an ancestry, they're just really observant. They are very much the perception ancestry. They're very good at noticing things. They're great at noticing traps. They have the capacity to see all around them and negate flanking and stuff like that. So they're great for anyone that likes wisdom as a stat. Otherwise, they're just kind of better off just hanging out. Maybe Golomas are, even though they're playable ancestry, maybe you'll meet more NPCs than you'll meet players playing them because of their nature.
I threw a Goloma NPC into a recent episode as soon as the art was out for it. I just showed the art to the players beforehand and asked them to describe what it looked like. And the description that came back was if H.R. Geiger had designed a horse. That was kind of...
I think that seems to be the consensus, is that it's a Xeno horse.
Wonderful. Gnolls seem like a sort of an unusual ancestry to go with. They're sort of a traditionally a monster, traditionally a more evil creature. How do you sort of go about, I don't know about redeeming, because we've been through it with sort of goblins and kobolds and all sorts, but how do you go about taking something like a gnoll where you have perceptions of it and turning it into something that people might want to interact with and play with, Eleanor?
Well, we wanted to include the gnolls in this book just because Africa has so much hyena lore. Like every culture down there, I think, or close to it, must have some kind of mythology about the hyena, and they're all... It's a mixed bag. Most of them, the hyena's a bad creature or witch creature. Some of them, they're actually protectors. Some of them, you just get some really strange lore, and some of that very strange lore turned into feats for the gnoll in this book. But I think it goes back to you talking about, we have different elves down here, we have different dwarves, we have different orcs, and in this case, we have different gnolls. Why not? They live in a completely different region. There's no reason they have to be exactly the same as the gnolls that live up in Katapesh or Avestan, that just are slavers and worship demons and are just all around horrible people. And in this case, the Null society really doesn't make people like them, even though they're not necessarily completely evil. It's stated in the book that to them, their people, their pack, their tribe, their clan, whatever, is more important, and their duty is to those people, which means, it's immoral to a Null to risk your life when you getting killed could affect, your siblings, your people, your clan. They have to replace you, they have to grieve you, and that's terrible. And so when a Null, when Nulls go out, they're just like, well, we want to, if we're gonna fight, we want to do it in the way, like the worst way possible. We don't want anyone to have a chance to even strike back at us. So they're like horrible at like terrorizing people, psychological warfare, ambushes, and that doesn't make people like you very much. And so they still have a horrible reputation down in the Expanse, and that's not even including, certain powers that these Nulls have. Like some of them can sort of like hypnotize you with their breath. It's just so sweet. Somebody called them a Cinnabon Null, because if you've ever encountered a Cinnabon stand, you know what it's like to just be like, oh, I'm being dragged over there. But and so they're sort of, I talked about their cannibalism too. They mean it as a sign of respect. That person was awesome, they're a great fighter, let's eat them, and then they'll be with us forever. But of course, but as a human being, you and I, if we came across a Null just like eating the face off of our friend that they murdered, then we're not gonna like them. But it's understanding how they view the world, and that they don't mean things in a malicious way. And you can still have evil Nulls down in the Expanse still, but you could also still understand that, like orcs and goblins, you can have good Nulls too. They might extend, their idea of people to much broader, and like be heroic even. These are all my people, I'm going to protect them against bad things like demons or whatever. And so it's just looking at them from a different point of view. And also, the Nulls here are slightly different because they developed separately than Nulls and Catapesh and all that. So they don't take slaves necessarily. They don't worship Lamashtu necessarily. In fact, the Nulls in the Mwangi Expanse are specifically stated that they kind of bribe her to stay away. And they only call as a last resort, because you know that if you call on Lamashtu, you might get what you want to, but it's also going to be huge, sticky, horrible mess. And so you don't do it unless something has really gone bad. But it's just looking at a Null from a different viewpoint.
Do you have any, because there must be NPCs now within the Pathfinder world, from adventure paths or bits of fiction and things from some of the new ancestries. Do you have any particular favorite NPCs from these new ancestries that have appeared recently?
So it's not out yet, but in Strength of Thousands, there is one of the new Mwangi Nulls. In fact, it is an ant Null, which is it's a small Null that looks more like an aardwolf, which so the Null heritages in the Mwangi Expanse book matched the 4 types of hyenas that there are on Earth. There's the spotted Null, the striped Null, the brown Null, spotted hyena, striped hyena, brown hyena, and then the aardwolf is actually also a member of the hyena family. So we've got the great Null, which is the spotted, and the witch Null, which is brown, I believe. The sweet breath is the striped, and then you've got an ant Null, which is like a 3-foot tall Null that looks like an aardvark. And like some people in the Mwangi Expanse don't even think that they're really Nulls. This is just no, that's something else. That's a different thing. But there will be an ant Null showing up in Strength of Thousands, and I hope people like her a lot.
Oh, fantastic. I can't wait to meet her. I tell you what, we talked about Lamashtu. Let's talk about, because there's a whole section on religion. Luis, what are some of the new religions and the new gods that we're going to get to play with for Mwangi
Oh
Expanse?
boy. I think the first one that comes to mind is Balumdar. He's just the god of everything big. He loves big things. He loves elephants, he loves whales, anything that's big. He's just all about that. And if you're a worshiper of Balumdar, you're like, I want to be big too. However you want to interpret that, maybe you'll work out so you're big and buff, or use magic to enlarge yourself or whatever. Transform into a dinosaur for Balumdar, that's great. That's just Balumdar. He's all about the big stuff, and it turns out Mwangi is full of big animals and big monsters, so he's the kind of perfect thing there. There's a lot of ancestral related deities here as well. We have Adanye, who is a catfolk deity that's all about just hanging out at home and enjoying the comforts and protection that comes with home. There is Grandmother Spider, who a lot of people know as Mama Anadi. She is very kind of Anansi inspired trickster, but also very good at weaving illusions. So that's kind of the patron goddess of a lot of Anadi. And the other one I'm trying to think of. There is Uvoko, who is a cloud dragon deity. So there's a lot of cloud dragon stuff going on in the Mwangi, it turns out. And I think if you are one of the new dwarves based out of the Mwangi, if you're in Beke or Taralu, that you might worship Uvoko, even though you aren't a dragon yourself. You have this kind of strong connection to cloud dragons, and he might be the one that you focus on. And then from there, there's a lot of cultural ones. I think the biggest ones that come to mind are the old sun gods. These are gods that were originally based out of the city of Mazali, and spoilers, you might learn a little bit more about them in Strength of Thousands as well. But the idea was that they were gods that were worshipped long ago in the city, and at some point knowledge of these gods was either forgotten or intentionally sealed away and lost. But now they've returned thanks to the help of local rebels known as the Bright Lions, who kind of discovered old temples to these old gods. So you have Chohar and Luhar and Tlehar, which are all gods based on the sun, but really in its different phases. Chohar's kind of like the midday sun, with Luhar being the setting sun and Tlehar being the rising sun. And each of them kind of are focused on the sun, but also represent different ideals. Chohar is really the kind of lawful good, justice, go be a good warrior to help other people. God. Luhar is about dreams and death. The setting sun kind of brings the end of the day with it, and it kind of translates to the end of life. And Tlehar is all about new beginnings, new changes, and rebirth and stuff like that. So there's different aspects to even just the same concept. We have the sun, we have someone like Saren Ray, and then now we have three other gods that also represent the sun in various different aspects. So that's a lot of new stuff you can look forward to. And there's also a little bit of information on existing gods and how they're represented in the Mwangi Expanse. Desna is one of the oldest gods to have followers on Galarian, and wouldn't you know it, she also has followers among the Mwangi Expanse, but they worship her in a kind of different aspect. She looks different to the people of the Mwangi, and there's different considerations about what kind of god is she. Why do we follow Desna? And that happens as well with a few other gods. Lamashtu is kind of prominent, but the worship of Lamashtu might be a little different compared to some of the other worshippers of Lamashtu you might have run into in your adventures. Gosray is very important. So I think there's a lot of religion stuff going on, a lot of exciting new gods that I hope a lot of people will look forward to creating followers of very soon, or at least be realizing that we're not just going to always run into Norgorber or Asmodean cultists and stuff like that. There's other evil gods also at work in different places, and we might have to contend with different deities this time around.
It's very nice. I threw a follower of one of them into one of the podcast episodes recently, and it's really nice because you had the edicts and anathema in stats listing, so you can very, very quickly just sort of say, what am I all about, what am I not all about, and that's all you need to get an NPC up and running quickly for something like that. It's very nice to have those sort of drop in. Should we talk about? Let's talk about the world in general, because we talked about ancestries and gods. We haven't talked about the expanse itself, which is expansive, you might say. It is. A lot of people will look at it sort of on their map of Galarian and sort of see it's a big jungle. But I was really interested when I started looking through it that it's not just jungle. There's a lot more to it than that. Eleanor, what are some of the other sort of places, as well as just sort of hacking through jungle? What are sort of other environments can you visit in the Mwangi Expanse?
Oh, well, you've got like a small savanna area, because you sort of want that in your faux Africa setting, just a place on the plains where you can find lions and elephants and all that sort of thing. And there's actually a surprising amount of mountain ranges, or just hills, just rocky areas. Like the dwarves live up in hills and mountain ranges, and there's also the huge barrier wall that sort of cuts the expanse off from easy access to the rest of Garund and Avestan. Those are really the prominent ones, aren't they? But yeah,
Lake Okota.
Oh, there's Lake Okota. I guess a lake is sort of a weird terrain when you're talking about terrain, but it's a viable one, I guess. There's the Sodden Lands, which is basically just a giant hurricane battered swamp, but people are still trying to carve out a living there.
What about some of the cities? Because there's a whole lot of and I like that they all have a city stat block, that tell you a few things. I really like that Usaru exports seafood under the list of things. I just think that's really
well. They're perched right on Lake Okota.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I guess it'd technically be lake food or fish. We didn't. We probably could have put a better label on that, but yeah. It's what do Cherokee eat, because they're not eating vegetables probably. So it's fish and some jungle fruit, maybe bits of human, whatever. But all of these cities, even Vidrian, although it wasn't arranged the same, all of these cities were in Pathfinder First Edition, but we never got a terribly useful explanation on any of them. We just got like little blurbs so that we knew what they were all about. But in the Mwangi Expanse, we picked 9 of these most prominent cities and sort of did a almost an adventure path style gazetteer on them, so that people could set their own adventures there. Certainly Nantambu is one of the obvious ones, since it's got the Magambi at the heart of it. And Vidrian recently had a revolution and overthrow the colonialist government there, and so there's lots of things going over there. But it might emphasize more of what we knew was going on in the region, but really didn't get its fair shake, like Sengor. I mean, it's got these Kaldaru, which up until recently, people weren't even sure where they had come from. It was clear that they were sort of a separate ethnic group than the rest of the Expanse. And recently, people have gone over to Arcadia and found people calling themselves the Kaldaru over there. It's like, oh, they were formerly from Arcadia and came over to the Expanse with these like really impressively technical ceramics and this amazing engineering skills, and built the city that's really this giant trade hub that most people would have to go to access the Expanse, as well as a bunch of pirate hunters. So they clash a lot with the Shackles pirates and usually win those. And we have Osibu, which has like this treant that actually was alive to witness Earthfall, is one of the most impressive things still alive on Galarian. And it's basically like this paradise, except for this well at the center of it that keeps leaking out dark magic. And then recently a Pathfinder messed things up even more, because that's what Pathfinders do. But it's still like this really fabled city, streets are paved with gold, that sort of thing. And you mentioned Osaru, where just, maybe don't go there, but if you wanted to, there's a lot of angry Charika, lots of worshippers of Ingazan, who's the demon lord of strength, that sort of thing. And that's just a few of them. Yeah, we wanted to take these seeds of cities that sounded really interesting, but that we'd never really gotten a fair assessment of, and really expand on them for people to be interested in and to be able to play in.
And I mean, we should say the quality of the art through this book is incredible. This is, I think, one of the best looking books that Paizo has ever done. But also the quantity of very specific art, especially in the cities section. Each city has got several bits of art showing just general life. Kobold ice cellars in Kibwe, and just really specific little just visual things that are great when you're planning a game, to just be able to show that to people. I'm really interested, because this is such a lore heavy book, after having done the ancestry guide, which is very rules heavy, but something that is where you get to really put a lot of work into just world building. I'm always curious, for when you're creating this sort of thing, Luis, like what makes a good bit of writing, a good bit of world building for sort of a role-playing game, versus maybe doing world building for a book, or for just a piece of fiction that someone's going to read? Is it a different approach when you're doing that?
I'm always of the approach where I want to know, it's a role-playing game, you're going to be playing a character, and I think giving information that helps your character know what everyday life is like wherever they are is really useful. Knowing what food people eat, knowing people's daily schedules, what daily life kind of looks like, knowing the stories you might have grown up hearing, and what kind of things might have inspired you to become an adventurer, and also just what you look like in terms of like fashion and clothing, I think is really helpful. All these things that are relatively mundane everyday life things actually end up fleshing out, I feel, the world a lot more in a way that helps out both GMs and players to really bring a place to life. It's very easy to just throw 100 pages of different adventuring sites and plot hooks and NPCs at you, which can build up the world in a way. If you learn that all these different locations are interconnected via this overall, ancient progenitor people or something, and that's a million different plot hooks that you get along the way. That is world building, but it's not necessarily the kind of world building that I think really is that works as well as something else could for a role-playing game. Knowing those intricacies of everyday life to better immerse yourself in the setting, immerse yourself in your characters, and be able to kind of really paint the picture of where you are and what you're seeing and what you're experiencing is, I think, the more important thing, at least for me. And that's the kind of thing I try to put into my writing and try to ask for when it comes to these books. The character guide, for example, really came about just like, we know a lot about humans. Why don't we know that much about elves and dwarves and gnomes and goblins and halflings? We want to give everyone their own ethnicities and history and stuff like that, to kind of build up I'm a dwarf, I know now all the stuff about being a dwarf because I'm a dwarf, rather than just know that, okay, I get a bonus to con and wisdom and I like rocks, right? There's a lot more to dwarves than that. So knowing those little details that really make dwarf culture come to life, make Mwangi culture come to life, that kind of stuff is really the kind of thing we like to put in these books. And I think it really does help a lot of people with their games. And Of course, we're still going to give you plot hooks and adventure hooks and location sites, but when we can, we're going to give you all this extra stuff too.
I really find that helpful because as a GM, I have a bunch of plot hooks and things, but the thing that happens all the time is the players say, I order lunch, what am I getting? And having those little details where you can and throw that out is extremely
Yeah, I wanted
helpful.
to. You mentioned how all the cities had lots of pictures of daily life, and we thought those were really important to include, just because when you go to a new city, you want to know what you're looking at, and in a lot of cases, even in Avestan and such, we're just like, well, what am I looking at? Certainly, when we were doing the world guide and gods and magic and that sort of stuff, we realized there were things we just didn't know anything about visually. We didn't know what Nex looked like, and so we ended up ordering a picture of Quantium for that. We didn't know what the Starstone looked like, and so Sarah Robinson, our art director, had to order concept art of it just to be just like, well, what does this huge important thing in our setting look like? And I think it really helps people get immersed in the city when they're walking down the street and it's like, well, what's this guy trying to hawk to me? What's this merchant trying to sell me to eat? What's the smell like? Even what's the weather?
That immersion is so important, and it's so clear in all. Like you flip through this book, and I always said I started playing Pathfinder because I picked up the core rulebook and went to the equipment section and said and felt like I want to pick that up. I want to hold that thing, and I get the same feeling from Mwangi Expanse with every one of the city things. That I think I want to go there. I want to stand in that street. It has that very immersive kind of quality. But we should say, playing Pathfinder is not all about taking the players to nice cities and letting them have a wonderful lunch. It's also about menacing them with horrible monsters. So we should talk about some of the terrible creatures, because of course there's a bestiary in the back of this book. Eleanor, what are some of the horrible things that we're going to get to throw at players from this book?
I think the standout right now is the Groot Slang, which is a mythological creature from Africa that is sort of described as the cross between an elephant and a snake. And how people depict that tends to vary, but everyone agrees that they're horrible, and that you don't want to meet one, and that it's hard to get away from one if you do have the misfortune of meeting one. But the book says that you can try and bribe them, but there's a chance they'll just eat you anyway. So good luck with that. They're gargantuan creatures, so it's just an all-around bad time.
Yes.
There's also the Mamlambo, which looks a bit like you stuck a dinosaur neck on a crocodile, and it's got this like weird skeletal horsey head on it, and it's got like a bioluminescent glow that attracts fish close to it, but it most likes to kill people and then chomp their face out and suck out their brains. And that's another a mythological creature from Africa, and you can't make up anything stranger than real life stories sometimes. I just like it because it sucks out your brains, but whatever. There are Kanana, which they're called half people, and people, I guess when you hear half people, most people think like a top of a person or a bottom of a person, but in this case they're split like right down the middle, and it's like the right half of a person or the left half of a person, but they somehow walk like they aren't missing half their body or whatever. And if you try to talk to them, they only hear half of what you're saying, and you can only understand half of what they're saying. But they don't talk that much because they want to eat you. So, but their victims are only missing half the body, and they're just very strange. Those ones, it's slightly easier to bribe them to go away. They're very fascinated by glittery treasure and stuff, so you can try and like throw something shiny at them to make them go away.
My goodness, half a gold piece, and It's terrifying. I want to. I've just realized we're rapidly running out of time, but I want to ask about. I want to ask about Lost Omens in general because it's nearly we're coming up on 2 years of Pathfinder Second Edition now. 2 years of the Lost Omens line existing, and as a line of books, I think I feel like it's the one that it's the one that has a real identity about it. That people get very excited about Lost Omens. People like rule books, but people get excited when Lost Omens comes out. And it was kind of a new thing, I guess, when Second Edition came out that we're going to try and do lore in this way. I guess after 2 years, Luis, what is Lost Omens? What do you think it is about it that makes it feel so different?
I really think it's that approach we have where we try to bring a place to life and get people excited about it. Honestly, I think 60% of it is just the art. The art itself sells the book so much. People loved all the ancestries and ancestry guide. People are loving the art in this book. Just getting to see cool, exciting art. And as we move forward, we're trying very hard to give you as wide of a variety of different adventures as possible. So when the time comes to make your character, you can just flip through one of the Lost Omens books and be like, that's my character, because it meets the specific needs that you whatever skin color you need, whatever ancestry you need, whatever class combination, if you need a wheelchair, you'll find a character with that as well. So there's, I think, a lot of that. And then I feel like we managed to always get very lucky and get authors who are very passionate about whatever they end up working on in a Lost Omens book, be it Mwangi, be it an ancestry, be it a new item. I think everyone is really excited to work on these books, and that shows in the quality of the work that comes through. It's amazing how many times someone turns in some work and I, as a developer, just kind of read it and say, all right, this looks good. I don't have to make any changes because they just knocked it out of the park right away. Or I might be like, oh, you forgot to bold this word. Okay, I'm done. Yeah, but I think that really ends up coming through a lot. I'll also attribute 10% of the success to our covers. Our covers are absolutely brilliant every single time. Katarina Burmack has been doing the covers since second book, since Character Guide. There's a very distinct style to her look at, and I think we are never going to let go of that style if we have the chance. We're going to hold on to that for as long as we can, because that is a big part of Lost Omens nowadays. Is just you'll get an amazing cover with this, and it'll kind of excite you to even just look at this book and inspire you to be like, all right, this cover rules. Let's crack open to see what other stuff is in here that this cover is promising. So be it an enormous scary monster in Monsters of Myth, or this just like amazing cultural backdrop with the Mwangi cover, which is unlike anything I've ever seen in any fantasy book. It promises you a whole new thing. I think a lot of it is just all the work that everyone is putting into it. Eleanor and I are lucky in that we get to pick a lot of just everything that goes into a book, not only like picking a given topic for a book, but then we get to decide, all right, well, we want these feats and we want these ancestries and we want these locations. So I think kind of really getting to have fun with what we pick kind of also comes through it a little bit. When we're really excited about something, we type up a storm about like, we want this and this and this and this and that, and hopefully that gives enough guidance to lead to the books to be as good as they are. They're very much team efforts, and I'm excited to work with everyone that touches on these books. I don't know. Eventually, we're gonna mess one up, and people will be like, "Okay, that was fine and not amazing," and maybe the streak will end. But for now, I think it's just we've been very fortunate with picking the right topics and getting all the right content.
I think the passion for Lost Omens by the creator, it's one of the things I love when a Lost Omens book gets announced and all the creators' names are released, and there's just everybody shouting, I wrote this bit or I've done a bit, and there's such excitement from the creators, from the people who like it, and from the two of you. It really shows that you're really passionate about it. I do think that comes across. What is What's next for Lost Omens? What's coming up next, Eleanor?
So the next book that's coming out is the Grand Bazaar. It's a book of item shops that you might say find in Absalom's Grand Bazaar, but we've set it up so you can just pick up those shops and plop them down anywhere you might need them. So when next time your PCs go, oh, I want to go shopping, we've got this whole shop with a store owner, plot hooks that store owner might have, a description of the shop, and specialty items that might be in there just beyond your old standard +2 striking broadsword or whatever. I think a lot of people are really excited for the accessibility items that'll be showing up in that book. We've got like a whole large section on that for just anything between just a normal cane for somebody to walk when they might have mobility issues to battle wheelchairs that you can trick out with flaming chainsaw runes on the wheels and install like a pipe organ in the back or whatever you want to do with it. Chairs that go underwater, chairs that maybe let something that was designed to live underwater just roll around on land. I think people will be very fond of what's coming in that book.
Oh, amazing.
Plus, they're keeping up with the theme of the Year of Ancestries. We're including an ancestry in that book as well.
Which ancestry are we getting in that book?
Oh, we're not going to tell you. We're just letting you know that there's an ancestry coming.
Oh, so close. Got so close. I can't let you go without that. There's one bit of news that kind of slipped out around PaizoCon, but wasn't really talked about, is that we are getting at some point later a book called Lost Omens Monsters of Myth. Yes. And there's kind of a product page and not much else for it. And I had to, while I've got you here, Luis, can you tell us anything about Monsters of Myth?
Oh, I can tell you so much, and I'm happy to do so.
Really?
Monsters of Myth is, if you ever read Lost Omens Legends, where we kind of give you a focus on specific important NPCs in the Inner Sea region, Monsters of Myth is kind of like Legends, but for monsters, in that we take 20 very notable monsters in the setting. So some of these monsters are ones that you've seen before, like the Sandpoint Devil, for example, that are just notorious, whether it's because they've been around for so long, because they're so dangerous, whatever. They have built up to be legendary creatures of some sort. They are the ones that people tell bedtime stories to children to scare them, to be like, you be good, or the Sandpoint Devil will snatch you away in the night. It's stuff like that, or ones that have been written about in books and stories and are songs in a bard's repertoire that have been around for thousands of years. So the cover, if you've seen it, it has Fafnir, which is the lord or the father of all Linorms. He's supposedly the reason why there are Linorms in Golarion. So he's featured in there. Sandpoint Devil's featured in there. We take a lot of existing monsters that you might have seen before in Pathfinder, bring them in here. We give you their stats so you're ready to fight them whenever. We give you a bit of history on who they are. When we can, we give you in-setting information, like there might be a story about them, or there might be like a little clue that you can use as a handout that shows, like, oh, here's a footprint of Sandpoint Devil that you find while you're searching for it. And then we also give you guidance on how to include them in your campaign. We have 20 monsters, and we want you to be able to use them whenever. So maybe Fafnir being level 24, I think, is maybe not the thing you'll want to fight right out of the gate when you're a first level adventurer. But if you're a GM and want to include Fafnir's presence, we give you guidance like, all right, here's what you can do. Maybe you can kind of go close to its lair and try to steal a treasure and deal with some of the other dangers that are around without having to fight Fafnir directly, and give you guidance with that for every monster at low and mid and high level tiers of play for that. And then we're also including a lot of new monsters. Half of these monsters are brand new, that we're just using kind of to expand the world. These monsters are also not all based out of the Inner Sea. A lot of them are, but some of them are based in other regions. So we're going to see a monster from Arcadia. We're going to see some monsters from Tian Sha, one or two from Casmeron. So there's going to be monsters all over to both show you a variety of monsters, but also kind of give you peeks into the other parts of the world as well, by the through the lens of these kind of folklore and history and legends that come with these monsters.
Amazing. I know, I mean, there are so many fans of Lost Omens Legends that will be excited that there is another book similar to that, because that was a brilliant book. I can't wait. We're out of time. This was fantastic. I could have talked for hours about this book. I really, really love it. Lost Omens Legends, Lost Omens Legends, that's definitely out now. Lost Omens Mwangi Expanse is out now, and it is wonderful. So I guess all that remains for me is to throw it back to James and say, Luis, Loza, Eleanor Ferron, and Eleanor, what is your spider's name?
Oh, Winston. His name's Winston.
Winston Dianardi. Luis, Eleanor, thank you so much for coming on the show. And I hope we will talk to you again very soon. Thank you very much. See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
I would like to take the nearest quiche and just put a gold piece onto the counter and then just leave.
I bought the quiche. Give it to the rat man. Do you want a quiche, Ratigan?
I love quiche. That's why I built my shop next to the quiche shop.
I'm confused. Who built their shop first? Because
Yeah,
I
he's
feel like
claiming-
the quiche guy, built it after, but now you're saying that you built yours next to the quiche guy. I'm just trying to get a time thread.
Wait,
You trying to have some quiche beef with me?
I hate beef.
Are you
No,
trying to say
definitely
that
not
there was a
beef.
quiche shop next door before the one that's there?
Yes, there was another quiche shop.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
I
so
see.
it's always
And that's the reason you built your shop next
Because
to
I
that,
liked
and then
that quiche.
and then that
Makes
closed
sense.
down, and then
Unfortunately, it burned down.
sure, and then another one opened.
Did any
the
of
other
them
side?
sell beef quiche? That sounds banging.
Beef quiche.
Yes, that's why it burned down. They were selling beef quiche and some minotaurs came out and burned it to the ground.
Oh, I see.
Well, I don't blame them.
Is this-
There you go.
Is this Kidway's quiche quarter then?